Now here's a question for you. When is a journalist not a journalist? The issue of a journalist's privilege to protect sources of information is likely to be one of the main issues at play as the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand, Winston Peters, who of course is the Foreign Minister too, launches his court action to find out who leaked the information to the media about the overpayment of his superannuation. Now, RNZ understands that Mr Peters is seeking comprehensive information from journalists. These are a newsroom journalist and a news hub journalist. He wants phone records over a period of about 10 weeks. He wants emails, meeting notes and even draft stories and internal memos. Court reporter Edward Gay was at court today and he joins me now in the Auckland studio. Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to say this all evening, aren't I? That's the problem when you swap jobs with John Campbell. Good evening, Edward Gay.
Good evening.
Now, some pretty strong language really today at court. What were people saying?
Mr Peters' lawyer, Brian Henry, he said that some journalists may have acted as political agents and he described the matter as a political setup. He said that the issue of journalist privilege may also be challenged in this case. That's where journalists have the right to protect sources. Mr Henry said that the leak related to private information that Mr Peters never intended to be made public. Andy Glennie, the lawyer for one of the respondents, that's the newsroom co-editor Tim Murphy, he said it wasn't clear from the application from Mr Peters just who was in the gun in this case. He said it was particularly unclear given Mr Peters had published some of the information himself.
Interesting. So these were the sort of initial sparring, I guess. Has a hearing date even been set yet?
It has actually. In March next year, Justice Hinton set that date today. She has also asked for further documents to be filed with the court, including an affidavit from Mr Peters himself. Mr Henry told the judge that the court would receive that affidavit, but it had been hard to get hold of his client, especially during the election period, and now in his current role as Deputy PM, it hasn't made things any easier.
No, and of course he's been overseas at this APEC meeting just in the last few days, has been reporting this evening. Now, the court action, there's been some criticism of it, hasn't it? Mainly from the media freedom advocates?
That's right, yeah, and RNZ has covered this. The former chair of the Commonwealth Press Union, former editor of the New Zealand Herald, Gavin Ellis, he said Mr Peters' actions were outrageous and he went so far as to say it could have a chilling effect on democracy. The International Federation of Journalists New Zealand representative, Brent Edwards, he said that what Mr Peters is doing is disturbing. So yeah, it has attracted
its critics. Yeah. Now, not just journalists, of course, caught up in this. There's several others who've been named.
That's right. The former Prime Minister Bill English is one of those. 3 other national MPs and their staff members. Also, the head of the MSD is also in there. In August, after inquiries by the media, Mr Peters revealed he'd been overpaid his superannuation for a number of years because he was on a single person's rate when living with his partner. Mr Peters paid the money back in July. He said neither he or the ministry could figure out how the mistake was made, and he has accused the National Party previously of being behind the leak.
Fascinating. Thanks very much for that, Edward. That's court reporter Edward Gay reporting on Winston Peters and his court action against journalists, public servant there, and those former National Party cabinet ministers.